Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Thomas Carter always believed that a life shared by two people was built on small gestures. A cup of coffee left on the table before work, brief texts exchanged in the middle of the afternoon, a simple, "I'm home," when walking through the front door, those details were, to him, the invisible glue holding a marriage together. So when he noticed those gestures starting to disappear, he felt something strange settle in his chest. It wasn't panic or immediate despair. It was a quiet unease, like sensing something had changed but not yet being able to name exactly what. He and Natalie had met in engineering school, back when both believed the future was a straight line you just needed effort and planning to follow. She was smart, driven, with a smile that lit up any room. Thomas fell in love slowly but deeply. It wasn't love at first sight, it was love built through long conversations, late-night study sessions, and shared plans. When they married 5 years after meeting, he was certain they'd made the right choice. Natalie seemed to think so too. They moved to Portland, Oregon, where Thomas landed a solid job as a civil engineer at a mid-sized construction firm. Natalie worked for a few years as an architect at a smaller office until she was tapped to join an ambitious urban redevelopment project in the city center. It was a big opportunity, and Thomas was genuinely happy for her. He supported her, encouraged her, celebrated alongside her. But it was right around this project that things began to shift. At first, the changes were subtle. Natalie started coming home later, always with plausible excuses, meetings running long, tight deadlines, unexpected issues with vendors. Thomas understood, he'd been through intense work phases himself and knew how draining they could be. But what started bothering him wasn't just the timing, it was the way she came home. Natalie seemed distant, as if part of her had stayed somewhere else. She answered his questions with one-word replies, avoided eye contact, went straight to the bedroom to change clothes, and often said she was too tired to eat dinner together. As the months passed, that distance turned into an invisible wall. Thomas tried talking, but Natalie deflected. He tried hugging her, but she pulled away with excuses about being sweaty, having a headache, or simply being exhausted. The intimacy they once shared frequently and spontaneously had all but vanished. Whenever Thomas tried to get close, she always had an excuse. And when he pushed the issue, she'd sigh impatiently, as if he were being a nuisance. It was on a Friday night, after another week of silence and evasiveness, that Thomas decided to confront the situation. They were sitting in the living room, she scrolling through her phone, he pretending to watch TV but really watching every move she made. He took a deep breath and said, trying to keep his tone calm, "Natalie, we need to talk. I feel like you've been distant. It's been months since we've really talked or touched. I want to understand what's going on." She looked up from her phone, but not with the openness of someone ready to share. Her expression was tired, almost irritated. "Thomas, I've told you already. I'm exhausted from work. This project is eating me alive. It's not about you." He pressed on, "But it feels like it is about me. You avoid me. We don't talk anymore. When was the last time we went out together? The last time we kissed like we meant it?" Natalie sighed, set her phone aside, and crossed her arms. "I don't know what you want me to say, Thomas. Things change. Relationships go through phases. Maybe the love just cooled off." Those words hit like a hammer. Thomas sat in silence, processing them. "Cooled off," he repeated, incredulous. "Are you telling me the love just cooled off? Just like that?" Natalie looked away. "It's not just like that. It's time. Routine. We're not the same people we were in college. Things change, Thomas." He shook his head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "But you didn't even try. You never talked to me about this before. You just decided on your own that the love was gone and that was it?" Natalie stood up, grabbed her phone, and said coldly, "I'm tired. I'm going to bed." She walked upstairs, leaving Thomas alone in the living room with the sinking feeling that something much bigger was happening, and he was being left out of his own life. In the days that followed, Thomas couldn't get that conversation out of his head. The phrase, "the love cooled off," echoed like an alarm. He tried convincing himself it was just a rough patch, that her workload really was overwhelming and that he needed to be patient. But there was something in Natalie's behavior that didn't add up. She didn't seem overwhelmed. She seemed evasive. Every time he asked about the project, she gave vague answers. Every time he suggested doing something together on the weekend, she invented last-minute commitments. Then Thomas started noticing details he'd previously overlooked. Natalie had switched perfumes. She wore makeup even on days when she supposedly spent all day in internal meetings. She bought new clothes, more put together, bolder outfits. And her phone, which used to be left lying around carelessly, was now always within reach, screen face down, and she'd immediately grab it whenever a notification popped up. Thomas wasn't the type to be suspicious. He'd always believed trust was the foundation of any relationship. But the accumulation of all these behaviors began forming a pattern he could no longer ignore. His gut, the same instinct that warned him when something was wrong in an engineering project, was now screaming that there was a structural flaw in his marriage. And he needed to find where that flaw was before everything collapsed. That's how, on a Tuesday afternoon while Natalie was at work, Thomas made a decision that went against all his principles. He picked up her laptop from the desk in their home office. Natalie always left her computer unlocked at home, trusting he'd never invade her privacy. But in that moment, Thomas felt he had no choice. He needed to know the truth. He opened her email. At first, everything seemed normal: work messages, exchanges with colleagues, meeting confirmations. But then he saw a folder labeled "Personal," archived. He clicked. And there it was, a series of emails exchanged with someone named Patrick Donovan. The messages started formally, about the project, but quickly turned into something entirely different. Compliments. Inside jokes. Lunch plans. And then, more intimate messages: "I'm thinking about you. I can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." Thomas's stomach churned. His hands trembled as he scrolled through message after message. There were photos too, photos of Natalie smiling next to a dark-haired, well-dressed man with a confident air. Photos of dinners. Photos of clearly non-professional meetups. And the worst of all, a photo of the two of them kissing, taken somewhere Thomas didn't recognize. He closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and sat there for several minutes, trying to process what he'd just seen. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just felt an immense emptiness, as if a part of him had been ripped away. The woman he loved, the one he trusted, the one he'd built a life with, was cheating on him. And it wasn't some impulsive mistake or a moment of weakness, it was a parallel relationship, cultivated over months, filled with planning, lies, and complicity. Thomas knew he couldn't just confront Natalie with what he'd found in her email. She'd deny it, downplay it, accuse him of violating her privacy. He needed more. He needed undeniable proof, something that left no room for manipulation or empty justifications. And he needed to act fast, because every passing day meant living another day inside a lie. That same afternoon, Thomas searched online for private investigators in Portland. He found several names, read reviews, compared prices, and chose one that seemed discreet and efficient, a small agency run by a former police officer named Richard Hayes. He called, scheduled a meeting for the next day, and for the first time in weeks, felt like he was regaining some control over the situation. The meeting with Richard was straightforward. Thomas told him everything: Natalie's behavioral changes, her coldness, her excuses, the emails he'd discovered. He showed the photos on his phone, the printed messages. Richard listened silently, taking notes, then said calmly, the voice of someone who'd seen this hundreds of times before, "I understand. You want visual confirmation, right? Photos, videos, something that leaves no doubt. Thomas nodded. Exactly. And I need it fast. I can't keep pretending everything's okay. Richard explained he'd conduct discreet surveillance over the next few days, tracking Natalie's movements, identifying patterns, documenting encounters. These cases usually wrap up in less than a week, he said. People are creatures of habit. If she's meeting this Patrick regularly, we'll figure out where and when. Thomas paid the deposit, signed the confidentiality agreement, and left feeling a mix of relief and anguish. Was he doing the right thing? Or was he being paranoid, destroying what little trust remained in the marriage? But then he remembered the messages, the photos, the kiss, and knew there was no trust left to preserve. The days that followed were the hardest of Thomas's life. He woke up beside Natalie, pretended everything was normal, made coffee, exchanged generic remarks about the day. She remained distant and cold, always clutching her phone. Inside, he burned with anger and pain, but kept up the facade. He knew any slip, any change in behavior, might tip her off. And he needed her to feel secure enough to keep acting as she always had, so Richard could do his job. On Thursday, 3 days after hiring the investigator, Thomas got a call. It was Richard. "I've got what you need," he said. "Can we meet tonight?" Thomas's heart raced. Of course. What time? They arranged to meet at a discreet cafe, far from their neighborhood. When Thomas arrived, Richard was already there, a thick envelope on the table. Richard opened the envelope and began showing him the contents. There were photos of Natalie leaving the office, always well-dressed, always smiling. And in many of them, Patrick Donovan was right beside her. They walked together, laughed, touched each other intimately. There were photos of the two entering a residential building downtown. "That's his apartment," Richard explained. "She goes there at least 3 times a week. Stays for a few hours, then comes back home." There were also photos of romantic dinners, park strolls, moments that should have been shared with her husband but were instead being lived with another man. Then Richard showed him the video. It was only a few seconds long, but more than enough. Natalie and Patrick at his apartment door, kissing before going inside. It wasn't a quick, friendly peck, it was a long, passionate kiss between people completely at ease with each other. Thomas watched in silence, jaw clenched, fists tight. When the video ended, he took a deep breath and said, "That's enough." Richard also handed him a detailed report, dates, times, locations, all documented. "With this, you've got everything you need for the divorce," he said. "And if you want, I can keep investigating, but honestly, I think you already have more than enough proof." Thomas thanked him, paid the rest of the agreed amount, and left with the envelope under his arm. He knew exactly what he was going to do. Thomas returned home before Natalie. He sat at the dining table, opened the envelope, and spread the photos across the wooden surface, arranging them in perfect chronological order. Each image told part of the story. This betrayal wasn't a single incident, it was a routine, a pattern, a repeated choice made day after day. He looked at those photos and felt a strange clarity. There were no more doubts, no room left for excuses or justifications. What he saw before him was the raw, unfiltered truth: the marriage was over, and Natalie was the one who destroyed it. When he heard the key turn in the lock, Thomas didn't move. He stayed seated, waiting. Natalie walked in, tossed her bag on the couch, and froze mid-step when she saw Thomas at the table surrounded by all those photos. Her face changed instantly. Color drained from her cheeks, her eyes widened, her mouth opened, but no words came out. Thomas looked at her with a calmness he didn't know he possessed. "Hi, Natalie," he said, his voice steady. "How was your day at the office?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, staring at the photos as if trying to understand how this had happened. Thomas pointed to one of the images. "This one's good, isn't it?" You two look happy. Oh, and this one, from the French restaurant. I always wanted to take you there, but you always said you were too tired. Natalie finally managed to speak, though her voice trembled, barely audible. Thomas. I can explain. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Explain? Seriously? What exactly are you going to explain, Natalie? That you've been having an affair for months? That all those late nights at work were lies? That while I was here believing in you, trusting you, you were with him? She took a step forward, hands outstretched as if reaching for him. It wasn't planned, Thomas. I didn't want this to happen. It just happened. Thomas slammed his hand on the table, making the photos jump. It just happened. Natalie, look at these photos. Look how many times you met. This wasn't a mistake or a slip-up. It was a choice. A choice you made every single day for months. Natalie started crying, tears streaming down her face. I was confused, Thomas. I felt trapped. The marriage felt monotonous, we weren't talking, weren't doing anything together anymore. And Patrick, he listened to me. He made me feel special again. Thomas shook his head, incredulous. So it's my fault? You cheated on me because I didn't make you feel special? Natalie, I asked you dozens of times what was wrong. I tried talking, tried understanding. And you always dodged it, always said everything was fine, that it was just work. You made me feel like I was going crazy for even questioning it. She moved closer, reaching for his arm, but Thomas pulled away. Don't touch me. His voice came out harsher than he intended, but he didn't regret it. Natalie stepped back, shrinking into herself. Thomas, please. We can fix this. I can end things with Patrick. We can go to therapy. I still love you, I swear I still love you. Thomas looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of sincerity, but all he saw was desperation. The desperation of someone caught, not genuine remorse. You love me, he repeated, bitterly. Natalie, you spent the last 4 months telling me the love had cooled off. You avoided me, rejected me, treated me like a burden. And now that you've been caught, suddenly you love me again. She sobbed, wiping her face with her hands. I know I messed up. I know I was horrible. But we can rebuild, Thomas. We have history, years together. Don't just throw it all away like this. Thomas stood up, gathered the photos, and placed them back in the envelope. I'm not throwing anything away, Natalie. You already did that. You destroyed what we had. And the worst part? You didn't even have the courage to tell me yourself. I had to find out on my own. I had to hire a private investigator to learn the truth about my own wife. Natalie's eyes widened. You hired a private investigator? Thomas nodded. Yes. Because you were never going to tell me, were you? You'd have kept lying, deceiving, living this double life, until when? Until you got tired of Patrick too? Until you found someone else? She shook her head frantically. No, it's not like that. I was going to end it with him, I swear. I was just waiting for the right moment. Thomas gave a sad smile. The right moment was never going to come, Natalie. You were perfectly happy like this, having both of us. Me, the clueless husband at home, paying the bills, waiting for you to come back. And Patrick, the exciting lover making you feel special again. You had the best of both worlds, didn't you? The silence that followed was heavy. Natalie had no reply. She knew Thomas was right. There was no denying it, no justifying it. The photos were right there, concrete, undeniable. She'd been caught, and there was no going back. Thomas picked up the envelope and walked toward the door. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow I'll come back, and you won't be here. I want you to pack your things and leave. The house is mine, I bought it before we got married, so you have no claim to it. And thank God we don't have kids, so the divorce will be simple. Natalie ran to him, grabbing his arm. Thomas, please, don't do this. Give me a chance. Just one chance. He looked at her hand on his arm and gently pulled away. You had every chance in the world, Natalie. You had 4 months to tell me the truth. 4 months to choose. And you chose him. Now live with that choice. And he walked out, closing the door behind him, leaving Natalie alone in the living room, surrounded by silence and the weight of her own actions. Thomas spent the night at a hotel near downtown Portland. He couldn't sleep properly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw images of Natalie with Patrick, the kiss at the apartment door, the romantic dinners, their knowing smiles. He felt a physical ache in his chest, as if something inside him were being crushed. But alongside the pain was a strange clarity. He'd done the right thing. There was no moving forward with someone who'd shattered trust so deeply and deliberately. The next morning, Thomas returned home. Natalie was gone. She'd taken her clothes, personal items, and some furniture that belonged to her. On the kitchen table, she'd left a letter. Thomas picked it up, hesitated for a second, then opened it. The letter was long, full of apologies and explanations that explained nothing, filled with pleas for forgiveness that rang hollow. At the end, she wrote, I know I don't deserve it, but I hope one day you can forgive me. I never meant to hurt you like this. Thomas folded the letter and threw it in the trash. Words no longer held value. Actions were what mattered. And Natalie's actions had shown exactly who she was. In the days that followed, Thomas contacted a divorce attorney. He presented all the evidence, the photos, the videos, the investigator's report. The lawyer was direct. With this evidence, the process will be quick. She has no grounds to contest it. And since you don't have children and your main assets are in your name, she won't get much. Thomas nodded. Good. I want this resolved as quickly as possible. The divorce proceedings began. Natalie tried contacting him repeatedly, calls, texts, emails, but Thomas didn't respond. Everything went through his lawyer. She even showed up at his house once, but he didn't open the door. He simply said through the intercom, "Talk to my lawyer." While the legal divorce moved forward, Thomas uncovered more about Patrick Donovan. A quick social media search revealed Patrick was married. He had a wife, Claire, and 2 young children. A picture-perfect family life, at least on the surface. Thomas felt a surge of anger. Patrick wasn't just Natalie's lover, he was a married man with kids, destroying not only Thomas's marriage but potentially his own as well. For a moment, Thomas wondered if he should tell Claire. Not out of revenge, but because if he were in her shoes, he'd want to know. He decided yes. He made a copy of the investigator's report and the most relevant photos, then emailed everything to Claire's address, which he found with a quick search. Along with it, he wrote a brief note, "I think you deserve to know how your husband is spending his time." The response was immediate. Claire replied the same day, thanking him for the information and saying she'd suspected something but had no proof. She said she'd confront Patrick and take whatever steps were necessary. Thomas wished her strength and ended the contact. He didn't want to get involved beyond that. What Thomas didn't expect was how quickly the story would spread. Claire, furious and wounded, wasn't discreet. She told friends, family, and even posted on social media, without naming Patrick directly but making things clear enough for anyone who knew the couple. Within days, their entire social circle knew. Patrick tried damage control, but it was too late. Claire filed for divorce and demanded full custody of the children, plus alimony. At work, Patrick's situation also unraveled. His company had a strict policy on ethical conduct, especially regarding relationships that could create conflicts of interest. When they learned Patrick had an extramarital affair with Natalie, a colleague from a partner firm, they launched an internal investigation. They discovered he'd used confidential project information to impress Natalie and had lied about his working hours to meet her. The outcome was inevitable: Patrick was fired. Natalie, meanwhile, also faced consequences at work. Once the story broke, many colleagues began looking at her differently: judgmental glances, hallway whispers, disapproving stares. She tried to hold her head high, but the pressure mounted. Eventually, she requested a transfer to another project in a different city, just to escape the toxic environment. The divorce was finalized in less than 6 months. Thomas didn't ask for anything beyond what was already his. Natalie didn't contest it. She knew she had no argument, no defense. She'd been caught, exposed, and now she was paying the price. After everything was officially over, Thomas decided he needed a real change. He didn't want to stay in Portland, a city filled with memories of a marriage that had ended. He requested a transfer at work and secured a position in Seattle, a promotion, actually, something he'd been aiming for a while. He sold the house, packed his things, and moved. Seattle offered a fresh start. Thomas rented a modern apartment with a city view and focused on rebuilding his life. He returned to hobbies he'd neglected during his marriage: weekend hikes, photography classes, catching up with friends. Slowly, the pain transformed into something else. It wasn't forgetting, it was acceptance. He'd been betrayed, deceived, but he'd survived. And more than that, he'd emerged stronger. A few months later, Thomas started seeing someone new, a coworker named Laura, an environmental engineer who was smart and had a sharp sense of humor. They started as friends, sharing lunches and swapping ideas about projects. Naturally, it evolved into something more. Laura knew his story, he'd told her everything early on, and she respected his pace. There was no rush, no pressure. Just two people getting to know each other, building something new on solid ground. Meanwhile, Natalie struggled to rebuild her own life, with far less success. After Patrick lost his job and his marriage collapsed, he vanished from her life. He blocked her number and stopped replying to messages. The relationship that had seemed so intense, so special, revealed itself for what it truly was: a convenient illusion that lasted only as long as there were no real consequences. Natalie tried reaching out to Thomas several times: texts, calls from unknown numbers, even showing up in Seattle once in an attempt to reconnect. But Thomas remained firm. There was no going back. She'd made her choices, and those choices carried consequences. He'd moved on, and there was no room in his new life for someone who'd broken his trust so completely. A year after the divorce, Thomas was having dinner with Laura at a downtown Seattle restaurant when he received a message from an unknown number. He hesitated but opened it. It was from Natalie. The message was short: "I just wanted you to know I truly am sorry for everything. You didn't deserve what I did. I hope you're happy." Thomas read it, took a deep breath, and without replying, blocked the number. He looked across the table at Laura, who was smiling at him, and felt immense gratitude, not for Natalie's message, but for having had the courage to walk away from a toxic relationship and make space for something real. Thomas and Natalie's story didn't have the happy ending he'd imagined when they married. But it had the ending he needed. He'd learned that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. It's waking up every day and deciding to be loyal, honest, present. Natalie had chosen differently. And now, each of them was living with the consequences of their own choices: Thomas with restored peace and dignity, Natalie with the weight of regret and the knowledge that she'd lost someone who truly loved her for an illusion that was never real. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.